The Galactic Empire had never known defeat. For centuries, its war machine expanded relentlessly, conquering planet after planet with cold, mechanical efficiency. Their fleets moved like tidal waves, swallowing civilizations whole, leaving nothing but submission or annihilation in their wake. No species had ever withstood their might. Not for long. When they arrived in Sol's sector, humanity was expected to fall like all the others. Resistance was futile. From the moment the first Imperial dreadnought entered Earth's orbit, it was clear that this was not a battle. It was a purge. Their ships, towering monoliths of metal and energy, blocked out the sun as they unleashed precision orbital strikes. Major cities fell in hours. Communication networks collapsed. Earth's military command fractured under the weight of unrelenting attacks. The Empire did not waste words, did not offer negotiations, only destruction. On the ground, human forces fought valiantly but hopelessly. Their weapons were outdated, their defenses laughable against the Empire's energy-based artillery. Armored walkers crushed resistance under mechanical legs, while shock troopers in power armor swept through streets, eliminating any who dared to stand against them. The skies belonged to the invaders, their sleek, silver warships blotting out hope with every bombardment. Reports from the outer colonies were even worse. Mars had fallen in a single day, its defense grid neutralized before a single shot could be fired in return. The lunar bases were taken without effort. The asteroid belt, once thought to be an impenetrable natural barrier, was turned into a field of debris. The message was clear. The Empire was inevitable. Imperial commanders barely regarded humans as an actual threat. Tactical assessments deemed them resourceful but primitive. They relied on outdated war doctrines, clinging to obsolete atmospheric combat while the Empire's battles were fought in the cold, unyielding void. Humanity had nothing that could rival the sheer scale and efficiency of Imperial strategy. Even the last remnants of Earth's fleet were a joke. Destroyers and cruisers, hopelessly outgunned, stood no chance against the sheer size of the Empire's capital ships. A handful of desperate counterattacks were crushed before they could even reach their targets. The few surviving admirals knew they were only delaying the inevitable. The conquest of humanity was not a war. It was extermination. And yet, in the midst of this unstoppable tide, a whisper of defiance spread through the ranks of Earth's shattered military. A phrase, spoken in hushed tones, barely acknowledged by Imperial strategists. A final gambit, dismissed as a footnote in their war reports. We haven't yet brought them in. The Empire's high command barely noticed. They had seen every desperate attempt before. Every species had a last stand, a final play, a last hope. And every time it had ended the same way. This time would be no different. Or so they thought. The first sign that something was wrong came when an Imperial battleship disappeared. It was supposed to be a routine sweep, a final pass over the last human strongholds to eliminate any remaining resistance. The ship entered the atmosphere, scanning for stragglers. Then it went silent. No distress call. No explosion detected. Just gone. Imperial command dismissed it at first. Malfunction. Sabotage. Human terrorists getting lucky. But then it happened again. And again. Entire patrols ceased reporting. Escort cruisers vanished from formation. Every attempt to trace the incidents led to dead air, wreckage scattered across burning cities. It was impossible. There was no fleet left to fight back. Humanity had been defeated. And yet, something was hunting them. Survivor reports were incoherent at best. Pilots babbled about impossible speeds, unseen enemies striking from nowhere. Some described phantom aircraft cutting through Imperial squadrons before vanishing into the clouds. Others swore they saw weapons that shouldn't exist, projectiles moving faster than sensors could track, ripping through Imperial hulls like paper. The Empire scrambled to respond, deploying fighter wings to counter the anomaly. They expected a dogfight. What they got was a massacre. The first engagement lasted 13 seconds. Imperial interceptors moved into formation, tracking the unknown signatures. Then in an instant half their squadron exploded. The survivors never saw the enemy. Sensors detected no heat signatures, no missile locks. Just death, silent and sudden. Panic spread. Imperial pilots, trained to fight in the void of space, struggled to adapt. They relied on energy shielding, guided targeting systems, predictive AI. None of it mattered. The enemy was too fast, too erratic. They didn't fight by the rules of space warfare. They fought like ghosts in the sky. Command still refused to believe it. Humanity didn't have this technology. They couldn't. The reports were exaggerations, errors in the system. But then the wreckage began piling up, entire wings lost in minutes, their attackers vanishing into the clouds before any retaliation could be made. The truth was undeniable. It wasn't a fleet that had been hiding. It wasn't a desperate last stand. It was something else. Something brutal. Something honed for a very specific kind of war. The humans had released their air force. And it was unlike anything the Empire had ever seen. Where Imperial pilots relied on calculated engagements, the human pilots thrived in chaos. Where the Empire depended on energy weapons and shields, the humans wielded railguns, hypersonic missiles, and kinetic rounds traveling so fast they might as well have been invisible. They didn't engage in drawn-out battles. They hit hard, fast, and without mercy. They weren't fighting for territory. They weren't fighting for honor. They were fighting to annihilate. Entire battleships burned in the sky, torn apart before their weapons could lock onto a target. Airfields were reduced to smoldering craters. The Empire's supreme confidence cracked as the impossible became reality. Humanity was not just surviving. They were winning. The Empire scrambled for answers. Tactical simulations were run, strategies revised, countermeasures deployed. None of it worked. Every attempt to predict the enemy's movements failed. Every battle ended the same way, burning wreckage plummeting to the surface. Imperial command, so accustomed to overwhelming superiority, was now reacting, struggling to keep up. It wasn't just a setback. It was a complete reversal. What made it worse was the precision. The humans weren't just attacking at random. Every strike was methodical. Supply lines were cut before reinforcements could arrive. Command centers were reduced to rubble in coordinated assaults. Critical orbital defenses were dismantled before they could even activate. It wasn't a war. It was extermination, carried out with surgical efficiency. Reports from the front lines turned into horror stories. Soldiers spoke in hushed voices about the demon pilots, faceless specters that never showed hesitation, never wasted a shot. They moved faster than anything in the Empire's arsenal, their weapons cutting through hulls like paper. Entire squads were wiped out before they could even raise their weapons. The lucky ones never saw it coming. The unlucky ones lived just long enough to hear the sound, sonic booms that came too late, the last thing they ever registered before impact. Morale collapsed. For the first time in the Empire's long history, soldiers hesitated before boarding their ships. Officers whispered about the growing list of vanished fleets. Pilots flinched at the shadows streaking past their cockpits, knowing that death would follow before they could react. The war was slipping from their grasp, and they had no answer for it. In desperation, the Empire shifted tactics. If they couldn't control the skies, they would take the ground. Massive invasion forces were deployed, entire divisions descending on human-occupied worlds in a last attempt to turn the tide. They believed that once planetside, the humans would be at a disadvantage. There would be nowhere to run. No room for their cursed aircraft to maneuver. They were wrong. The moment the drop ships entered the atmosphere, the Air Force struck. Hundreds of Imperial transports were torn apart before they could even break through the cloud layer. Those that managed to land found themselves in a kill zone. Human aircraft didn't need to fight them face to face. They simply erased entire landing zones with precision strikes, leaving nothing behind. For every soldier that made it to the surface, 10 never got the chance. The ones that survived found themselves stranded, their support destroyed, their communications jammed. Entire legions, once part of an unstoppable war machine, were now nothing more than scattered remnants, hunted one by one. The Empire had believed their dominance was absolute, that no force could stand against them. They had never imagined an enemy that didn't fight fair, that didn't give them the battle they expected. They had come to conquer a species. Instead, they had awakened something far worse. Something that would not stop until the sky was theirs again. The final battle should have been a decisive victory for the Empire. They gathered what remained of their forces, amassing the largest fleet still operational. Every remaining warship, every available soldier, every last reserve of firepower was thrown into one final, desperate offensive. The plan was simple: crush humanity in one overwhelming strike, break their momentum, and remind them of their place in the galaxy. It never even began. The human Air Force struck first. Before the Imperial fleet could form up, before their command ships could issue orders, before their defenses were fully operational, the assault was already underway. Hypersonic missiles ripped through capital ships before their shields could cycle. Electronic warfare shut down communications, turning the once coordinated fleet into a collection of isolated, blind targets. The Empire's admirals, who had once dictated the course of entire wars, found themselves unable to react. Their ships were built for large-scale engagements, for calculated warfare waged over days or weeks. But they were not given that luxury. The battle was measured in minutes. Every counterattack was predicted, every attempt to reorganize shattered before it could begin. Destroyers tried to flee to higher orbit, only to be picked off with ruthless precision. Carriers attempted to deploy fighters, but their launch bays were obliterated before a single craft could take off. Even the Empire's mightiest dreadnoughts, symbols of their unchallenged power, were reduced to burning husks before their gunners could lock onto a target. It was not a battle. It was a slaughter. And when it was over, when the last Imperial ship fell from the sky in flames, humanity delivered its final message. A single transmission, broadcast across all Imperial channels. No threats. No demands. Just a simple warning. Never return. The Empire listened. For the first time in its existence, it retreated, not to regroup, not to strike again, but to escape. What remained of their forces abandoned human space, fleeing back to their own territory with the remnants of their broken fleet. The invincible war machine had been shattered, not by superior numbers or greater technology, but by something far worse, an enemy that refused to fight on their terms. Humanity did not chase them. They did not pursue or attempt to conquer. They had no interest in ruling the stars. Their war had never been about expansion. It had been about survival. And now they had ensured it. In the aftermath, the galaxy took notice. Those who had once feared the Empire now looked to humanity with something far greater than fear: respect. The species that had been deemed weak, primitive, insignificant, had humbled the greatest military force in existence. They had done it without mercy, without hesitation, without ever showing their faces. And should the Empire ever forget that lesson, should they ever think to return, the skies would remind them. Because the last thing they would ever see would be the ghosts in the clouds.